How is power or the absence of it important to development? Hi, welcome to Shades of Us. I'm Ramat. Today, I'm looking at what I have titled Electric Power and Development. I think that's how I'm going to couch it. Electric Power and Development. So, up NEPA! As a Nigerian, you know what that means. It means that power has been restored and we now have electricity. Even young babies who are born today, who have to deal with the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, who are the new NEPA, would also say, up NEPA, once power is restored. So I want to talk about our electricity, generation, distribution, and how it affects our development. So Nigeria generates a little less than 10,000 megawatts, and the population as a whole needs at least 40,000 megawatts to actually function effectively. And that's even just a very conservative figure. So if we can generate 40,000 megawatts, we'll do good. But then if we generate more, it means we'll do much better. But Nigeria generates little under 10,000 megawatts, which means that we are deficit on what the population needs. Now, generation of power is usually through, like 86% is through fossil fuels. That's our gas, natural gas. And then we have the hydroelectric power generation and thermal power generation. So that's how we generate power. But then in terms of distribution, okay, before I go to distribution, there are like 3 major companies who generate electricity in Nigeria. In fact, until 2005, it was the government's job to generate electricity. But as they had the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, I think that's what's called, of 2005, things began to go into private hands to a certain extent, right? And then we have 3 major companies that are generating electricity in Nigeria. And then in terms of distribution, we have 6 major companies we have 11 major companies that are distributing electricity in Nigeria. So they are all on paper private companies and things like that, but there's still some controlling power of the government. It's not just regulation that they do, but they also have some controlling power in terms of our electricity generation. So in spite of all of this, like I mentioned, our electricity generation is super low. It's super, super, super low. There are days where people have electricity for 4 hours in 24 hours. Some people have 8 hours. And then those people who have 8 hours are like, oh, my neighborhood, we have power. And then some people have maybe 12 hours. And you rarely ever hear of any neighborhood at all in Nigeria where they consistently have 24 hours electricity. It's very, very rare. So now to make up for all of this lack of electricity that we have, a lot of generators are being proliferated. So almost every house has a generator. We create our own electricity. We spend so much fuel on powering generators in order for us to have power, because power is such an integral part of our lives. And then some people would think about it and say, oh, I spend way too much money buying fuel, or PMS in this case, or buying diesel. So I need to just get something else. So a lot of people are beginning to look at solar power generation for themselves. They're installing inverters and things like that. And then they're using solar energy to generate electricity for their house. And it's good. It's a relatively cleaner form of power generation, but it still has some of its problems because of the inverters themselves and the batteries and things like that. But I don't want to get into all of that technical aspect. In summary, we have the generating companies or GenCos who produce less power that we can consume. And then in the middle, we have the distribution companies that distribute less of that power, because it's what they get that they distribute. And then you have the clients who need so much more power and electricity to do what they need to do, and then they supplement by using generators or solar energy and whatnot. So that is the summary. How is power or the absence of it important to development. I want to look at health. Woo! Like, again, in one of the episodes I did, I talked about how doctors use their phones to carry out surgeries because they don't have electricity in their hospitals, and then maybe they are on that day where they can't afford to buy fuel or diesel for their generators. Imagine how risky that is for the average Nigerian who needs to go under the knife for some reason or the other. Some of these people are accident victims. Some of them are just, doing one surgery or the other. And then imagine being in hospitals that do not have stable electricity. Anything can go wrong. I mean, there are monitoring machines, there are so many things. There are vaccines, for example, that need to be kept at a certain temperature. And because we do not have proper electricity, that becomes a problem, and the viability of such vaccines become problematic. And now that we're looking at COVID-19, where everybody needs to have a vaccine to be safe, it just means that vaccines become less viable because they are not properly kept. The next thing that electricity is key to is industrialization. Now, I'm not just talking about the big industries. I'm talking about the small guy in the next house that is making sachet water, or the person who is making soap in his house, or somebody who is processing coconuts for coconut oil, or things like just very little average everyday things. Everybody is trying to make ends meet in Nigeria. And then imagine that somebody, has to spend so much money on generators in order to fuel the simple industrialization processes that they have. And for the big companies, imagine how much fossil fuels are being used to power the industrialization process. And it becomes so problematic because that means that a little more harmful toxins are emitted into the air, which in essence contributes to the carbon footprint of the world. Yes, Nigeria is contributing very small, but we're contributing, right? So there are just so many ways that power is important. But I'm picking health and industrialization. And industrialization, like I said, is not just the big things. It's also even people who are having regular shops that are selling things and then they need power. And for me, that's what I consider to be industrialization. The big guys, the middle guys, and the small guys together improving our country. Then I think that we need to gradually phase out generators, except for emergency situations, like when there are power outages, like national or state level power outages, or when maybe during a natural crisis.